Welcome to the panel um, here in the Italian pavilion to the panel on the paradigm of Venice, valuable lessons from sea level rise adaptation and disaster risk reduction. This panel aims to highlight Venice adaptation experience as a global laboratory of sustainability and resilience, focused on addressing environmental and cultural heritage conservation issues, offering concrete insights and solutions that can be relevant internationally. The focus of the discussion that we'll have today with two panels and a Q&A session at the end is about which lessons from Venice adaptation model can be shared with other coastal cities to contribute to the implementation of the global agendas. This initiative intends to present the best practice developed in Venice and stimulate constructive dialogue with the international community, strengthening Italy's position as an innovation center for climate adaptation, and also particularly focused on environmental and cultural heritage topics. I'll be your moderator. My name is Vittorio Negretto, research manager at the UF University of Venice. And we'll hear today from different speakers in two different sessions. And I would like to call to call on stage the first panelist for the session on the role of climate action that gives an insight of the opportunity and challenges that a global perspective poses for the local dimensions. And I would like to call here on stage Alessandro Costa, Director General of Venice Sustainability Foundation. Please join us. No, please join us here. I'll call everybody here. Sorry. I would like to call also Animesh Kumar, Head of the Global Unit for Climate Action and Comprehensive Risk Manager in Bonn office for the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. And we'll have online with us Alessandra Antonini from the European Committee of Regions, that she will connect virtually. So, thank you. I would like to start this first session on the role of climate action. And please, Alessandro Costa, now that you make yourself comfortable, I would like to ask you to join us here and talk us um, about Venice and the heritage and adaptation and environmental aspects.
Thanks a lot, Vittorio. I guess I can play with this, right? And or this, it's even better. And it's a great pleasure to be here. It's a great pleasure to host you today in this side event that is organized by the Venice Sustainability Foundation, which I have the privilege of directing. Um, a question about adaptation. What I would like to say emphasize right from the start is that we always think about a process of physical adaptation to some changes, but the system that Venice put in place in this moment and the experience that we would like to showcase, it's a combination of software and hardware, which means that it's a combination of multi-level interaction among stakeholders, all of them different stages and different levels interested in the fate of Venice, and at the same time, it's a series of interventions that modified the not just the landscape, but modified, let's say, the seawater management within and without the lagoon. Without further ado, just let me tell you one quick thing about Venice Sustainability Foundation, which is part of the software. It's a relatively new entity that it's established under the patronage of the Italian Premiership, and that sees a widespread partnership of stakeholders, local, national, and international stakeholders, all of them coming together to identify projects and implement initiatives that would have a an impact on the path that Venice is walking, is transitioning towards its territorial sustainability. which is actually the aim of Venice Sustainability Foundation, which has the overall goal of identifying and implementing a model for integrated sustainability for Venice, its lagoon, its surroundings, and at the end of the day, is the entire regional as a spatial footprint. What we do together with that group of stakeholders um, is to identify initiatives proposed by the single stakeholder or single partner, or that the partner has somehow collected through its own uh, network of relationship, and present this to the rest of the group. Uh, Once you reach a consensus over one of those initiatives, well, it's not difficult to imagine that that initiative would have a good facilitation, good help in walking the path that is between the idea and then the realization, the practical realization of that initiative itself. These are, to get into a better detail, the areas in which the foundation is active. And without naming all of them, if you just want to take a look, it's a combination of evident threats or challenges that our territory is experiencing these days, and sustainable tourism, for instance, is part of the way we would like to tackle the tourist presence in our whereabouts, but it's also a combination, as I said, of opportunities that are open because of the many transitions that we are experiencing these years. We live in times where transitions probably are more accelerated than previous time. And I'm talking about the energy transition, the digital, so on and so forth. And the last thing is the other opportunities that we would like to somehow propose or foster, or let's say stimulate the starting, the opening, or the extension of other economic sectors other than tourism industry. So this is in a nutshell. But and that's enough for software. Um, all this would not have been possible, or it would have been possible, but let's say with a different spirit, probably different expectations, without having found a solution for the main issue, the incumbent, which is the physical protection of Venice and its lagoon and the ecosystem that surrounds it. Uh, Serious risk. I think I don't need to go into many details, telling you what's the worldwide known problem of high tides in Venice, sea level rise and consequences. That's just a diagram that chart. You can see the how the frequency changed over decades in the events. What to us are extreme events, even though we're talking about being within the span not even 2 meters, but that's enough to flood up everything. And this is just some visual. I here recognize some guys and some people, some friends that are very much experienced with Venice, and I know that those pictures sound quite familiar. Well, the news is that since October 2020, well, this is not the case anymore. And it's not the case anymore because after many decades, 5, 6 decades almost, we have managed to implement this integrated system for water management and as I said, territorial management. That is the Moses system. But it's a combination of operations outside the lagoon coast at the inlets and also within the lagoon itself uh, to manage the flow of water coming in and flowing out because of tides, and keeping in mind the factual possibility of still running different kind of businesses. And for example, the port business, which is uh, possibly the real other economy that we have in the territory as relevant after tourism. And it works like this. It's what we call the game changer. As I said, 4 years of experience in running this sort of barriers, floating barriers, that you hear much about in the following interventions by my colleagues panelists today. But to be very brief in this overview, you'll see that how the landscape looks like. We have three inlets, so we need to control water flow in all three in all the three ways. Um, and this system is composed by a set of barriers that, when there's no need for water control, they lay on the bottom, as you see in that little figure, uh, low corner left, because they fill with water, with salt water. Then, when the let's say the tide, the sea level rises above the certain thresholds that it's considered, when there's need to operate this floaters, these barriers, uh, the water is pumped out and air is replaced that, so that they float, and they control, and they also, let's say, keep some motion, keep some movement in order to reproduce not the physical wave by definition, so no molecules are coming in and out, that's for sure, but at least the mechanical transfer of the mechanical length wave. um, it's almost enough for me. So, to conclude, it's a common problem. So it's a common issue, and we have identified that solution. And that solution to us, it's an enabler. So once we protect the city from its, let's say, physical threat, after that, then we can more solidly implement all the ideas that we have in our software house. Um, Regulated and resilient. But what is more interesting is that, as we're doing here today, we're happy to share this experience. We're happy to share the knowledge. There's no protection whatsoever on the. There's no patent on those systems. And if anybody would like to reach out to know more, to know in which way this could be adapted to other territories, to other geographies, to similar challenges, we're happy to do that. Very last, and this is part of the mandate that we have received from the city of Venice, of being part of the Making Cities Resilient global partnership of the United Nations, connected to the United Nations Disasters Risk Reduction. And Venice is among the short list, among the really short group of resilience hub. And what we will, let's say, export, showcase, and represent in different meetings, as this one is exactly this sort of things that you hear today, and all more, let's say, vertical and more, let's say, focused aspects in all the different technologies and systems. And thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, Alessandro. Thank you for introducing and having a focus on the fragile and particular challenges of the Venice Lagoon and the solution also implemented. Um, I would like to call now on stage Mr. Animesh Kumar. Who is yours?
Thank you very much. Very good afternoon to you all. And I'll basically start off from where Alessandro basically left in the last bullet, which is Making Cities Resilient program that we run from UN Office for Disaster Reduction. As was introduced, my name is Animesh. I'm the head of the Bonn office of UNDRR, and I'm the Global Portfolio Manager for Climate Change and Data. So the presentation will focus more on local action, why city resilience is important, and how does this have the potential in terms of, through a partnership approach, enhancing urban resilience. I work and live in Bonn, in Germany, which was the first city which joined the Making Cities Resilient program long back. And I'm just informed that Venice was the first city in Italy to join the campaign long back as well. So that goes on to show the level of peer-to-peer exchange and learning that we can do. So just to set a bit of a global context in which we are working, in 2015, 8 years back, we saw a very opportunistic, momentous moment where three different international global frameworks were adopted in the same year: the Sendai Framework, the SDGs, and the Paris Agreement. And that was the year we often call as the year of resilience because of that very reason. Last year was also a very momentous year for us because these three international frameworks completed their 7 years of implementation. And basically, it was the midterm stage for SDGs and the Sendai framework and the first global stocktake of the Paris Agreement. And if you look at the result of the midterm stocktakes of these three international frameworks, the findings are not very different. The headline message is that we are off track. We are not on track to achieving the goals. In fact, in the current rate of implementation, by 2030, only 17% of the SDGs will be achieved. And that is a danger sign for us already. In terms of the Sendai framework, we have made some progress. For example, global mortality because of disasters has declined by half over the last 20 years, decade to decade. But at the same time, number of affected people has increased by 80%. Economic losses have increased by manifold, and we are losing around 1.8 million infrastructure units per year in the last 8 years, majority of them being in cities. So while we have contained the lethality of disasters in terms of the mortality impact, we have not been able to do so for high frequency, low impact events which affect the populations at large. We have also seen that at the localized scale, the disasters are increasing in their nature, frequency, magnitude. We are seeing disasters occurring which have never occurred in that space, in that city. And we always kept getting off guarded in terms of the impact of these different impacts. The other thing that these three international frameworks also found out was that we're operating in a very siloed approach. While we're having a common stream of resilience across different frameworks, our way to implementation is very siloed. Just to give an example, there are 131 countries in the world that have a disaster risk reduction strategy. The day the COP began, there were 60 countries in the world that had a national adaptation plan. And if you put these two maps together, you will see sizable number of countries that have both. There are sizable number of countries that have neither. How do we ensure that then we move forward towards the path of resilience in a coherent way, considering that risk reduction and adaptation are not very different when it comes to implementation? Early warning systems, nature-based solution, infrastructure resilience are both adaptive as well as risk reducing measures. But they are in two different plans being run by two different ministries in the same country, looking for two different parts of funding, implementing the same activity. Leads to a lot of incoherent implementation, but the real level of coherence happens at the level of implementation, and the level of implementation is always local. So let's see what SDG 11 says. As of now, 75% of the world cities have some form of a local plan. That's what we have. We have target E of the Sendai framework, which is the same as the SDG 11 of the among the SDGs. That is only half of the story because just having a plan does not mean that it is also being implemented. And that is something which we are trying to see, that how can we translate the planning processes into implementation. And that's where Making Cities Resilient program has come into being. So what we did long back, around 15 years ago, that we worked with different partners and countries to come out with 10 essentials of city resilience. And these 10 essentials cover every element that is required to make a city resilient. It's all about coordination, it's about knowing your risk, it's about ensuring that we follow ecosystem based approaches, it's about enhancing our institutional capacity and be prepared as well at the same time to be able to tackle and address disasters in an ex ante way. So before the event strikes, we are prepared to manage this. Over the duration of 10 years, when this campaign was launched in 2001 up to the end of 2020, more than 4,500 cities globally have joined the campaign. And by joining the campaign, they have signed up to these 10 essentials, telling us, the city mayors and local authorities, that they are committing to following these 10 essentials of city resilience. Now, having seen the success through this campaign, we have translated from advocacy into action. So since 2021, we have translated MCR as a campaign, now MCR as a program. And now what we are doing is we have three-staged approach to city resilience, and that is what you see on the right side of the slide. In the first stage is what we were doing in the previous 10 years, which is about advocacy, knowing our risk, and so on. The second stage is all about planning, and third stage is about implementation. And we accompany cities through this journey of resilience from stage A to stage B to stage C. In each of these stages, there is one tool or a plethora or suite of tools that are applied to ensure that cities have the right capacity at their disposal to be able to make this work. For example, under stage A, which is about knowing your risk and knowing the resilience systems better, we have a very innovative tracking system for disasters. It's called Disinventar. It has been there for the last 30 years, and we are now translating this into becoming a new tracking system for loss and damage. 113 countries currently have that system, and all the data is being collected by the governments. The beauty of the system is that it goes down three administrative tiers below the national level to go down to state, district, and in many cases, sub-district level to know what kind of events have happened in the past and what impacts have they caused, what are the vulnerabilities of populations, and all this information taken together helps us understand what actions to take. For example, in the case of sea level rise, which is growing a slow onset event, and we really acknowledge that we are not fully geared up to address that hazard, it's a slow onset event. There are 2.2 billion people currently living in coastal cities globally, and this population is slated to increase to 5 billion by 2030. Don't think our coastal cities are fully prepared to be able to. Is it working? Is it working? Okay, mine was not working. By 2030, 5 billion people living in coastal cities is a big number, and I don't think in 5 years down the line, we are able to provide them the right resilience tools. And that's where city to city learning and so on is very important. All of this is done through global partnerships. We have regional networks of actors who are working on this. As I also mentioned, we have suite of tools and knowledge. Governance is a key element of city resilience, and that is something we really promote. And I'll come to something which will be interesting is the dashboard. The dashboard provides a marketplace for demand and supply to meet. And this is where stage C is where the cities normally reach. So that's a roadmap. In the first stage, cities commit, enhance, and commit to the 10 essentials. That's the entry level stage, but then they also take some initial steps to assess their level of resilience. This is done through a scorecard. We call it the MCR scorecard, and I'm sure many of you have seen it. It's available in around 30 languages globally as of now. It was done through private sector partnership. IBM was our core partner, and it was developed through a set of checklists. And those checklists help us understand where are we on the stage of resilience and what are the gaps. That analysis then takes us to stage B, where we turn those gaps and challenges into an action plan, and then this action plan is then monetized through financing measures, including through the dashboard. So this three-step process has a number of activities that we conduct in partnership with multiple organizations. The end result is to have the right impact so that we have the right resilience strategies in place, and also develop bankable projects to be able to sustain the impact of what has been achieved through these measures. These are some of our partners through which we work, and we have many coordination mechanisms in place, and that helps us bringing this partnership together to be able to provide a more joint voice to different cities. I'll end this with where we are. This is as of day before yesterday, the latest statistics. 1,770 cities have been part of this process, of which 476 have actually reached stage B, and 571 cities have reached stage C. When they reach the stage C, that's where the dashboard is activated. They can develop the bankable projects, submit it to the dashboard, and we have a suite of, you already saw the partners, but other private sector partners as well also have access to the dashboard, and they can commit with their offers to the cities. It helps us coordinate the demand and supply together through a marketplace approach, and it also helps us ensure that there is neither overlap nor gap in terms of the support that the cities receive. So, with that, I will end my presentation and thank you very much for your attention.
So for the moment, I would like to dive into the Venice case. So looking also now that we have set the framework of the lagoon and also what is the action, the global action taken on, and what are the needs also from the subnational authorities and where adaptation actually takes place. Now we would like to dive into the dimension of Venice and its environmental and heritage conservation issues and challenges, let's call them challenges, and also the solutions that are being brought up. So opening this session, I would like to call on stage Pierpaolo Campostrini, who is the managing director at Corilla. Please, Pierpaolo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Vittore. Thank you very much. No, we are not so few people, so we are happy, because the risk is to speak only to ourselves. No, but thank you for coming. I gave this name to this very brief presentation to see how, at the end, the MOSE is protecting not only the citizen and the material things, but also the big immaterial heritage that we have. We started this discussion, as was mentioned before the previous speaker, in 2012, so more than 10 years ago, where we had the pleasure to host a meeting there, organized. The name of UNSCDR was different. It was a previous name, the City of Venice, the Superintendency of Ministry of Culture. We had the Special Envoy, the Secretary General, which in that moment was Margaret Wallström, and we invited many mayors of the different cities. 6 or 7 mayors came together with the mayor of Venice to involve, and the idea was something which now seems to be quite obvious, to the heritage concern to be inserted into the local and national disaster risk reduction strategy and plans, and also in the managing of the cultural heritage in museum, in all of the activity. Also, the disaster risk should be put into consideration. And so we have this Declaration of Venice. But the main idea that was presented in Sendai 2015 was that the integrated, the multi-hazard approach, which is absolutely necessary for protecting cultural heritage protection, could help also in making understanding that only an holistic approach can help for disaster risk reduction. And of course, there are not only one risk. We have to take in consideration the seismic rule for buildings, the flood and water-related risk protection, the fire risk, and also the other risks. All these risks, in some sense, must be considered. And what is this holistic approach that the cultural heritage protection need is also helping the understanding why a strategy should be should be put in place. The MOSE, as Alessandro was saying at the beginning, is regulating the tides. Is a mobile protection. We are not interrupting permanently the breath of the laguna with the sea. Normally, 2 times per day enter the oxygenated water into which give life to the whole ecosystem, and 2 times per day the deoxygenated water and let's say dirty water is expelled, flushed out from the sea. But sometimes you have to interrupt this breath, due to the sea level which is too high, which would have flooded Venice. And you see, the first time, the 3rd of October, the level of the sea was different because of the action of this long barrier. Here, these long barriers is very flexible, is able to work also for continuously. We had in the same year, from the 4th and 6th December, 44 hours of closure, which is not only one single cycle of the tide, but the sea was kept up by meteorological reason for a longer time, and Mose was able to defend. Also, we avoid a very scaring event occurred in November 22, 2 years afterwards, which was reached the peak more than 2 meters inside at the sea level in front of the littoral island of Lido. And but the blue line say that Venice, in the lagoon of Venice, we have only 80 centimeters, so we have more than 1 meter of difference. This was not enough. You see in the, and I will be back on this issue afterwards. For lower tides, but in the most precious part of Venice, we have to protect our most important gem, the Basilica of San Marco, with an additional protection. An additional protection because in order not to regulate, to use the Mose too much, we set a threshold, which is 1 meter, but under this threshold, San Marco is flooded. And therefore, the salt water goes into the marbles. What you saw in the first picture shown by Alessandro, there was the effect of the salt water in the marble, which is destroying it is like a cancer for the marble, because the water, when it's wet with salt water, afterwards the water evaporates, but the salt stays inside and crystallize. So this glass barrier allows to protect the basilica, the immense cultural heritage of the basilica, for any tide. So, and this is something that we did also with it was a big engineering work. This allowed the restoration because, of course, after this, and in particular, the tremendous flooding occurred in 2019. This was a picture that I took afterwards. You see these mosaics which go back to the 13th century, was raised up and lost, and was not possible to restore them before assuring the absolute protection from. And this occurred, and in a couple of years, thanks to the funding of Ministry of Culture, we were able, our artisan, were able to restore completely this most beautiful part of the pavement. Other restoration are presently are undergoing in order to reserve. I mean, the Mose itself was a big engineering machine, 1.6 kilometer of dike. Let me go back to the Mose before. This is one of the, in the mouth, there is 400 meters, each of length between the two sides of the inlet. Each of the barrier is wide 20 meters, and the different. Here we have also the company which drew the design of the Mose, Technical from Verona, but it was plus more than two generations of scientists, engineers, which build up in 50 years this kind of 50 years, not only for works, but 50 years of discussion, 50 years of design, of testing of models. Sometimes also it should come even further. Also, we had some little problems, but now the system is working and worked for more than 92 times up to now. And but also, it's not only the way we use this big engineering. We made in the meanwhile nature-based solution for the morphology restoration, which is because we should help the nature to defend itself to the sea level rise. and also to other kind of pressures that the presence of the humankind makes with some additional pressure. So we helped the salt marshes to be effective and to be there. So it's not only the city, not only the city life, the economy, but also the nature which has been protected. Finally, I would like just to mention that Venice in this way, in these years, went as a real laboratory. So we had a large experience that I very briefly summed up today, but there is an experience that we are continuing, we are sharing through the European project Horizon and also the cooperation program Interreg Europe, which allow us to teach and learn. When you exchange the experience, it's always you gain something. So Venice is present in more than 40 projects, European projects that I was involved in today, but these are the most important ones which are running presently. West Coast, Danubius is for building a research infrastructure connecting the river sea along the river and seas, but also the cooperation with Slovenia, our borderline. Our border is not only the terrestrial one. With Slovenia, we have a terrestrial border, but with Croatia, we have a marine border. And also, in this case, we are doing such kind of exchange of experience. Of course, but as been mentioned before, we are part of the network of WNDRR. So thank you very much for your attention. The message is we are protected, we are sharing the experience, we are a laboratory open to the world. Thank you very much. Forget the last one. Well, this is an important thing because it just occurred a couple of weeks ago. It was the first assessment of sea level rise in Europe made by an initiative by JPI Ocean and JPI Climate, so two European infrastructure. And we have published this report which take the overall assessment concerning both the pressure and also the adaptation measures that are running. Venice case is one of the cases which is presented in this important report. I would like to underline, and you are free to go there, and is a peer reviewed, but is free for downloading. Grazie.
Thank you, Pierpaolo. We're trying to have still on board Alessandra Antonini. Alessandra, please, can you please tell us if you can hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we do hear you wonderfully.
Very good.
Alessandra Antonini from the European Committee of Regions. Thank you for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Vittore, and thank the organizer for this invitation to this very relevant event. I'm very sorry for not being in Baku. I would love to be there, but unfortunately, we are also very busy in Brussels, and I just had to take the time to just connect to this event. I will try to make a bit of a bridge between the discussion you are having, also with a bit of a European perspective. I suppose you've been discussing this in these days many times. Climate is already changing. We are doing our utmost to reduce this change, but climate is changing with a huge local impact. And this discussion means that we need to adapt. And this is not a theoretical discussion about goals, targets, frameworks, agreements. It's a very practical one. What we do locally to avoid disasters and to be prepared. And this is a part of what you've been already seeing, and you will continue seeing during this event and probably in other events, what we do locally to adapt to climate change. And this is not a technical discussion only, because this adaptation requires technology, but also implies reshaping completely the face of our territories, of our cities, and dealing with all the dimensions that these cities have. And this is why I think the example of Venice is so valuable and inspiring. Because the question is, how do we save Venice without losing Venice? So it's not about saving the buildings of Venice from climate change. is saving Venice as a concept, as a cultural concept, with all the heritage and the cultural value it takes. Of course, this doesn't mean preserving as it is, as a fixed entity, but making it evolve without losing its soul. And this is the challenge that we can only address locally. Of course, as we saw in the first intervention, there is a need of a wide range of stakeholders working together, but the mind and the driving seat needs to be driven by local authorities who really know how to find the right balance between all the solutions with this respect in mind and with the community, with the needs of the community in mind. So the question is for me, the example of Venice is exceptional, but what do we do to avoid that this exceptionality remains an exception? What can we do to make the Venice exception become the Venice model? And for the Venice model, I don't speak about the specific solutions, because specific solution needs to be locally designed. I speak about the method, the methodology, the philosophy that is there, with a systemic approach, with the multi-stakeholders engagement, with the multi-level engagement. So how do we pass there? And here I would like to bring a bit of a European flavor to that. I think that from one side, we need to recognize finally, the protagonism of local authorities. We need to support and we need to empower. And this is, again, is not a theoretical request. This means money directly to cities and regions, to the ones having to act. This means empowering. This means capacities. And this means mechanism to co-design so that we really have this driving seat in the right place. On the other end, we of course need all the other levels of governance helping and creating the right framework. For me, at European level, what we need is a new European framework that is able to boost action, to connect the dots so that we avoid working in silos with adaptation, biodiversity, mitigation, and we have this holistic view that we already saw in the example of Venice, that empowers, that put the power on the implementer, so the local level, but also grants the flexibility. Because if we try to impose top down, we are pretty sure that we will not make it right. And my message today is that from the Committee of the Regions, this is actually our main goal, to ensure that the framework is right. And we don't want to ensure this alone. We want to work with institutional and not institutional partners. So I think we share the same goal. Let's work together to ensure that we set the rules right to make the Venice model work for other cities and regions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alessandra. There's a clap in the room. I don't know if you can hear it, but trust me. And thank you. I thank you. I like the concept that you said about the cultural concept of value of Venice, but in evolution. And I'll be sure to bring also your question in the panel later of what can be done to make the Venice exception to a Venice model. So we will discuss this. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
I would kindly ask Francesco Musco, the Director of Research at the University UF of Venice, to join me here, please. And we'll dive once again into Venice, even though also Alessandra gave us a taste of how Venice is seen from the Committee of Regions. Please, Francesco.
Thank you very much, Vittore, and Fabio, also for the managing of the of a different interaction also at distance in the session. Just a few elements to going back to Venice. Ready per Paolo Campostrini, Alessandro Costa succeed to providing a specific figure of the elements connected to risk reduction, but also to adaptation. What's happened in Venice is related to the fact that the capacity of a city also to design solutions for adaptation it's connected to different elements. The increase of extremization of climate weather phenomena, in particular connected to extremization with water and the heat waves that affected especially obviously the mainland of a city, but considering that the wider territories in which the city has been developed in the last few years, also changing the view in the sense that when we consider Venice, we consider the old town, but a wide mainland that has been also increased in the general debate, also considering the vision of a metropolitan city. A metropolitan city has an important role also to counteract initiatives to adaptation to climate change, considering different levels. One of the purpose of a session is also to figure out some elements connected to the so-called, referring to multi-level governance. And the multi-level governance, considering Venice, is absolutely fundamental. It's fundamental because from one side, the role of a region, from one side, the role of a metropolitan city, and the other side, what the municipality can do in collaboration with other institutions. Some extremization of phenomena, the temperature, variability of rainfalls increase. And what happened after the big flooding of Venice in 2019, when Moses system was still not working at that time, is to consider this element. And despite maybe Moses not be designed as an adaptation solution, in reality is a measure that can support the adaptation to the city, also to elements that are not connected just to the high tide. The high tide is a normal and ordinary phenomenon, but also considering the extremization of phenomena due to the global climate change. So the considering the elements taking care of Venice that have a possibility to take in consideration the phenomenon of heat waves, the phenomenon of urban flooding, but also in combination with the high tide. Despite the last one is a natural phenomenon that's been existed in Venice since the origin maybe of the city, to design a proper adaptation measure for the city is absolutely necessary to consider for one side the multi-level governance, and for one other side also the capacity of a city to respond to the different impact. And in the last few years has been designed specific also data set information to give a possibility to the city to properly start the design adaptation from the different impact that could be affected at the mainland of the old town, and at the same time the adaptive capacity of the mainland of a city. And also understanding in the global perspective, also in which way we can manage the different kind of risk that affect the city. But looking always at the wider area dimension, not looking just to the historical city, that maybe is more evocative in the global context and global debate, but it's important in our perspective, taking in consideration of the different levels that can affect the impact on the global cities. And then also providing specific data set that considering the metropolitan area of the city can provide specific information of a potential impact on the different areas of the metropolitan territory of the city. And so in this direction, the last few years has been starting to design the adaptation plan for the city with specific action that take in consideration of the urban regeneration, reconversion of industrial areas. The MOSE itself is one of the major, obviously, despite it's not be designed for this purpose, but is effectful for this purpose in collaboration with other kind of measures that have been designed in the last few years to reduce the impact on the islands, to increase the capacity of urban parks, for example, to counteract impacts in the mainland, the capacity also of specific river canals into the system of a lagoon to counteract the impact of water extremization. But the real effort is for the future. What's happening in the future for Venice is strictly depending on what is happening in terms of carbon dioxide emission in the long-term strategy according to the Paris objective. It's not irrelevant for Venice as a, how can I say, quite representative of coastal cities. The capacity of a city to respond, but also the capacity of a city to respond to the impact, expecting the different scenarios that can be outlined for the next few years. In this sense, I think that it's absolutely important taking in consideration the multi-level perspective of our cities, multi-level governance, and the capacity that Venice can be a symbol of experimentation, a symbol of measures that could be implemented, a place also where the measures are tested and exported in other coastal cities, in other cities of interface in particular. The presence of a lagoon is very representative and at the same time is a fundamental place where the experimentation can be, how can I say, generalized to other contexts and exported in other contexts. This is fundamental in this perspective, having in mind this, but having in mind that Venice has a future, according also how we'll be able to implement the global scenarios objective on climate reduction emission. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francesco, for in particular for also bringing in the multi-hazard, multi-vulnerability, multi-hazard perspective within the conversation. And I would like, without further delay, to call on the stage Andrew Potts. He's Heritage and Climate Action Advisor for Europa Nostra. Please, Andrew.
Great. Well, thank you, Vittorio, for that introduction. Hello, all. My name is Andrew Potts, and I come from the heritage field. I am, as you heard, I'm the focusing in my position on cultural heritage and climate action. And so I'm particularly wanting to talk for the next few minutes about this idea of Venice as an example, as a model, as a driver of the conversation, as a leader of the conversation, because I think this is quite an important opportunity. And so that's what I'd like to focus on. I come here in three capacities. I wear three hats, and I'm going to spend a moment to tell you what they are, not because you need to know so much about me, but because it will give you some flavor of how the cultural heritage sector in general has organized to deal with the climate emergency. First, to say that I'm here representing an organization called Europa Nostra. Europa Nostra is the European voice of civil society committed to cultural heritage. I bring you greetings from the Secretary General of Europa Nostra, Snežka Quadvig-Mihailovic, a great friend of Venice. I think my Venetian colleagues will agree, and she's sorry she couldn't be here in person. In 2021, Europa Nostra released a report called European Cultural Heritage Green Deal. This report went through all the chapters of the Green Deal: farm to fork, renovation wave, climate smart mobility, and discussed the cultural and heritage dimensions of each of those aspects of the European Green Deal. But the overarching message of that report was that the European Green Deal would not succeed unless effort was made to win the hearts and minds of Europeans behind the project of green transformation. I think it's fair to say that at European level, that effort was not undertaken. There was never a cultural heritage overlay to the Green Deal. There was no European Bauhaus. It's a bit of a different thing. Now we see retrenchment. We see debate about ambition for the Green Deal. So it really puts in a spotlight this idea of, can we take forward green transformation without paying attention to the social and cultural barriers and drivers, enablers of climate action. So that's sort of about Europa Nostra. 2 years ago, Europa Nostra received a multi-million euro grant from the European Parliament for a thing called the European Heritage Hub. And the idea of the hub, this came from the Parliament, is that the cultural heritage sector in Europe is fragmented and it's not ready to succeed, let alone lead in the transformations facing Europe: digital, social, and green. So how does cultural heritage succeed and lead in the face of Europe's green transformation? That's the project I work with. And that project held an important event last year in Venice called Reimagining the Anthropocene, putting arts, culture, and heritage at the heart of climate action. And we had that in St. Mark's Square. And from that project, from that event, was launched a global campaign called the Global Call to put arts, cultural heritage arts, and the creative sector at the heart of climate action. That campaign now has 2,000 organizations that have signed on. It went to Dubai to COP28, where we had the first ever meeting of ministers of culture at a COP last year, and also launched an effort to start to fill what we consider to be the culture gap in climate planning and policy. Now, fast forward to Baku, we have the second ever high-level ministerial dialogue on culture-based climate action. That was Friday. We have culture and heritage in multiple decision texts in the mitigation work program and adaptation, et cetera. So why do I tell you this? Well, we launched that global call campaign, we, the cultural heritage voices of the world, in Venice. In Venice. I think that's important to note. I make another point. Many of you are aware that there have been multiple efforts to list Venice on the World Heritage List in danger. This has captured global attention. It's been controversial. The danger list is not meant to be punitive, but it can be perceived that way. It's meant to direct resources and solidarity to places at risk. I bring it up not to rehash the debate about whether or not Venice should have been listed or not. I bring it up to mention that people around the world were interested in this topic. The listing of Venice was a very high-profile debate. My own organization, Europa Nostra, took the position that Venice should not be listed. This was quite controversial in our own networks, not because Venice is not in danger. We think that it is, but because we didn't think it was the right time to trigger those solidarity mechanisms. Venice has already implemented significant interventions. You've heard about them. We felt like now is the time to consolidate that, learn from it, and take stock in the intermediate future. So we launched our global call on culture and climate from Venice. The world paid attention to whether Venice should be listed as in danger at UNESCO. The point is, Venice is of global interest. Venice is an iconic heritage beloved by people around the world. It has the power to capture the imagination and the attention of people on every continent. So how do we harness that power? How do we take advantage of that power to increase action and ambition on climate change? This is what to me is very interesting. And this is why I am glad to hear Venetian colleagues talking about their ambitions to make Venice a model, to have these, to use the symbolic power of Venice to drive conversations about climate change around the world, also specifically about climate change and cultural heritage. I alluded to this before, but we strongly believe that culture is a gap in international climate planning, policy, and finance. We're not the beneficiary of climate finance. There's not attention to climate policy in our sector. And there are many, many places with iconic heritage even that are behind schedule, that are not taking the actions they need to take on board the climate emergency in the management of their heritage resources. So can this attention to Venice, can the actions of Venice help change that? Yes, I think so. So this is what I want to applaud and spotlight. I ask the Venetian colleagues to bring the world along this journey in all its dimensions as transparently as possible. How did you galvanize political mechanisms to raise the money, the governance, the finance to put this in place? Other cities would like to know this. What about the trade-offs? I mean, we know, I learned from Kurila that there will be trade-offs. As the Mose is deployed more and more often, effects on the lagoon, the Baranye, how are these trade-offs being mitigated? This is something everybody in the world would like to know. How do you deal with, and Professor Musso mentioned this, the differential between median sea level rise versus high tide flooding? These are questions that I hope will be included as Venice showcases their work for the rest of the world. So I just wrap up by saying that I think the opportunity presented by Venice to drive climate action globally and drive attention to the cultural dimensions of the climate crisis is extraordinary. We maybe one of the most famous Venetians, as far as I know, is Vivaldi, and of course you know Vivaldi wrote the Four Seasons. But what was the Four Seasons? The Four Seasons was a meditation on how Vivaldi was experiencing the seasons: spring, fall, winter, summer. A few years ago, a group of music composers, and climate scientists teamed up on a project called the Uncertain Four Seasons. And what they did was develop an algorithm that in real time, based on GPS coordinates, pulls in data about sea level rise, species loss, disaster. And this algorithm translates into a numerical formula. And that formula adds and subtracts notes to Vivaldi's score, and that based on inputs that are site specific. That uncertain Four Seasons, that disconsonant modified Vivaldi score, has now been performed by symphonies all over the world, illustrating how would Vivaldi experience these seasons after climate change. I attended the premiere of the Uncertain Four Seasons in Venice at the Santissimo Redentore Church. It was an unbelievable experience. So this idea of Venice stimulating this entire conversation from Vivaldi to now, it's very powerful, and thank you for spotlighting it here today.
Thank you, Andrew. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you. I think you've touched, inspired everybody in the room with the creativity of thinking things different, of taking also, leverage also the creative tools to also have it at the heart of the climate action. And I think we'll be back on this question in discussion because it's very stimulating. So for the moment, I will ask all the speakers to join me on the stage. Please join me here.
Just a little last time change in our schedule because we have the honor and the privilege to host the Director General of the Italian Ministry of Environment and Energy Security, Alessandro Guerri, and I would like Alessandro to just to address us with a couple of words. Thank you, Alessandro. The floor is yours.
In the last days, but also at UNGA New York, it's something that happened to me to speak in public, and obviously about climate change. And I always refer Italy as an example of how to solve problems or find solution, because we are a mountain country, mountain peninsula in the middle of the sea. We have 7 out of 60 million people living on island, sometimes in small archipelagos, and another 7 out of the 60 on area classified as mountains. Venice, for sure, I already mentioned it as the most iconic city for climate change, for the effects of climate change, for sure due to the sea level rise. And then we can also say we could be proud to have found a solution, a technical solution to protect it. That is this huge enterprise named MOSE. I will also say that it's the most beautiful city in the world, but I cannot because it's overcome by Genoa. And yeah, so as Ministry of Environment and Energy Security, we are available to cooperate with you to export the Italian solution, the Italian system, and we are in contact with Mr. Costa. We knew each other in these days, but there is a common ground to start working together. And so I will follow you for the last panel. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
So we thank Director Guerri, and let's get back on track. Please, Vittore.
Yes, thank you, Alessandro, and thank you, Mr. Alessandro Guerri, for bringing also the commitment and the perspective of also from the national point of view to the city of Venice. I would like to focus now the last 10 minutes of our panel on an open discussion between the speakers. And I would like, first of all, to start with Animesh, because I know you have a back-to-back meeting, so we'll be happy to hear something on you, especially on the program of the Making City Resilience 2030, and also on what are the knowledge transfer mechanism or the scaling up strategies. So some elements that could be learned, let's say, from Venice, and also especially brought to other coastal and heritage sites in need of knowledge, best practice, and advice or experience.
Thanks a lot. In terms of the size of the program itself, I mentioned we have 4,500 cities that joined the campaign and committed to 10 essentials. Now we have 1,700 cities that are part of the program as we speak across different stages. That provides a huge opportunity for peer exchange, peer learning, and that's what the connecting part that we can do very well. And this connection between and the peer-to-peer exchange can happen at multiple levels. For example, a few years ago, in fact, the year I moved to Bonn in 2021, we had a devastating flood in Germany. Bonn was one of the cities that was affected, and up in north in our valley, cities were drastically affected. The city mayor has reached out to us since then that what are the recovery experiences from the cities in Germany that they can share with other cities in the world. And I think that's something which we can also do with other cities as well on other topical issues. So it's peer-to-peer exchange, that's one. We also have global coordination committee, which has been established where all the cities can benefit from, multiple cities can come together. And then there are platforms. So we have just completed a series of regional platforms. I was in Montenegro 10 days back, where the Europe and Central Asia platform was concluded in Budva. Before that, I was in Namibia, in Africa, the Africa Regional Platform, and before that in Manila for the Asia Pacific Ministerial Conference. Next year, in June, we will have the Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction, where the whole world will converge in Geneva, providing a huge opportunity that what are the things we can do to accelerate action in the next remaining 5 years of the Sendai framework. And I think there's a lot we can learn from Venice City, which we can share with other cities and make urban resilience as the real call to action. So it's an invitation to Venice to be at the global platform and also share the experiences as well. But unfortunately, I'll have to leave because I am speaking at another event in Marrakesh Partnership, so I'll have to go.
I know. Thank you. Thank you, Animesh, for joining us in the panel and with us. And you, because you had wonderful questions, but I do also have to know if you have one half answer to all the questions that you brought to us. Well, we can hear from this, please.
Well, I just want to make one additional point, and it really builds on an observation that Professor Musco made already about the global situation of greenhouse gas emissions and scenarios, the RCP scenarios, and where we're going. It needs to be said that there are many heritage sites, especially coastal heritage sites, around the world that cannot adapt in situ to 3 degrees of global warming, even 2 degrees of global warming. We know Venice has bought time with its interventions. Did it by 50 years, 100 years? I guess it depends on the emission scenario. But we can't decouple these conversations from decarbonization. And so I think I just want to underscore that point and say that I think the lessons learned here have to continue to be communicated in the context of the urgent need to get back on a 1.5 degree pathway, which will buy Venice even more time and save other sites who aren't able to make the interventions that Venice has been able to.
Thank you, Andrew. And I think it will be interesting also to know what are the enabling conditions that allow this protection of Venice to happen. So, what are the cooperations? What is what kind of stakeholders and partners have to be part of this joint effort of protecting Mose and building this new paradigm, protecting Venice, through Mose, all the Mose interventions, and enabling Venice now to have
this new paradigm of resilience. Alessandro, would you like to share, or Pierpaolo, as you wish?
Well, well, I can share some, let's say, some more details about our own experience at the foundation, which, to me, well, to my knowledge, has not many other, let's say, similar examples worldwide. There was probably some 20 years ago a similar attempt in Barcelona. It was 2004, and but it was in the form of an association. It was the Association for the Strategic Plan of Barcelona. Um, you basically need four factors, four different kind of stakeholders, and then the rest would gather would tag along. Um, you need decision makers by definition. You need policy makers. You need technologies and research, and then you wrap up all this with financial institutions. What we have, what we're trying to do in Venice, is to attract uh, sustainable finance. The sustainable finance means we also would like to attract the private sector and to show that there is already a group or a level of impacting initiatives in terms of sustainably impacting initiatives that they are at, let's say, at that economic, they express that economic value, that they are meaningful per se already, and that's what we would like to leverage.
Thank you, Alessandro. Pierpaolo, would you like to add to this?
I would like in my role also to underline the essential part of scientific research. So we hear from universities, national research bodies. Actually, the solution must be knowledge based, and what we are doing is to provide the knowledge, because there is no solution based on a bad knowledge. So I think that the role of scientific institutions, the researcher, is to provide the state of the art of the knowledge about the climate change, about the modeling of the different issues which are part of the problem. Also, selecting there is the need of interdisciplinary work, because the disciplines we are educated in one discipline, and but we need also to put together the different disciplines, and maybe to find also a transdisciplinary approach which is needed today. And this is not an easy task, which should not be underevaluated. But the last is the community that should decide what to do, how to adapt. So finally, the role we see in Venice, maybe we take a bit too long to arrive to the solution, but we did. The importance is to experiment, to share the knowledge, and so leaving this, measuring the results and sharing the experiences. That is important. Measurement and sharing of experience is a key for a possible success in adaptation of all the world, not only in Venice.
Thank you, Pierpaolo. So we heard about art, we heard about finance, we heard about research. Francesco, would you like to share also with us? I'll pass you my microphone, or thank you. On a concluding remark, we have still a couple of minutes, but also the role of education and how the paradigm of Venice got into also education and this relation with water and heritage.
It's a fundamental aspect, because all the consideration made by the colleagues, the necessity to have a very base knowledge that is it's fundamental to design any adaptation solution everywhere. In Venice, this aspect is more evident, and also the capacity of the research university to train new professionals, new researchers in all the disciplines that could be contributed to adaptation is a fundamental branch of the experimentation. It's fundamental because the transdisciplinarity has to be educated. Otherwise, the single discipline will be, how can I say, try to maintain themselves. It's absolutely evident that to design any plan for adaptation, any solution, any local policy related to adaptation, a multi-level, from one side, approach and multidisciplinary, but the capacity to keep together the approaches is the very base of success.
Thank you, Francesco. So, concluding this session, I would like to thank the Italian Pavilion for hosting this event, and I would like to thank the Venice Sustainability Foundation for leading this effort, together with Corilla, the Consortium of Research of the Lagoon, and the UAV University of Venice, and obviously Andrew and Europa Nostra in the person of Andrew and Alessandra for the Committee of Region, the European Committee of Region, to bringing an Animesh for the United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction Office, to joining in and bringing their perspective into this. And I would also like to thank you all the guests that went back and forth in the audience to being part of this conversation.